This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Again, for all of you who had to get up very early, or maybe not so early, unfortunately, this is going to be for this moment the last live appearance of Rabbi Glatstein over here. There are some great plans. We just discussed over breakfast with Nosson Weltler. Who knows what will be in the near or not so near future. Two practical things. There, in the back of this shul, there are some Sforim left, some Sforim. And Rabbi Glatstein prefers not to have to take them back to America. So we have an incredible offer for you, which is, if you walk to the back of the shul and look at the Sforim there are 2 for 1. 2 for 1. From now, what? What?
Buy 2.
Sorry. No, correction. If you buy 2, the third one is free. Yeah, it is an offer you can't refuse. Okay. Then the second thing is that if you go to Rabbi Glatstein's website, Rabbi DG, met een G, dus voor ons Nederlanders, ja, DG, not this jockey, RabbiDG.com. You can register for the WhatsApp group, and then you'll be informed about any Shiurim he gives. And there are Baruch Hashem a lot. And also, of course, that the Shiurim Rav Glatstein gave yesterday, they're already now online, via Torah Anytime. So, in this afternoon or tomorrow, if you feel a little bit, homesick to this great Yarchei Kallah, so you just turn on the Shiurim and then you're still there. You might even see me sometimes. Okay, please. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So this is something like a farewell address. It's been a real pleasure. It's been a real honor. We had a great time here. I want to thank, again, Rabbi Katz for putting together a beautiful program, for hosting us so warmly, for giving us the opportunity to meet this beautiful kehillah and beautiful community. And Rabbi Katz did everything with such ahava and nedivas halev. And Be'ezus Hashem, this should be a stepping stone for many great things for you, for your families, for your community. I want to thank the Mar Da'asr Shlita, Rabbi Chunwald, for opening up his home, the Beis HaKnesses, to host this beautiful Yarchei Kallah that we should feel at home. Like we said yesterday, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Hachnasas Archim. He says, make yourselves at home. So the Rav said to all of us, make yourselves at home. And we really appreciate his Hachnasas Archim, and the shul should continue to grow and become a center of Torah and Tefillah and Kedusha for the whole community. I want to thank my dear friend Reb Nosson Weltler, who came along with me to assist in all the Shiurim and in dissemination. So thank you, Reb Nosson. I couldn't have done it without you. Thank you very much. Very interesting. In 1978, Maran Rabbi Ovadia Yosef was invited by the Spanish Kehillah in Spain to visit and to inaugurate a yeshiva in Madrid. And in the context of this visit, Rabbi Ovadia was invited to meet King Juan Carlos, who reigned Spain from 1975 to 2014. And in 2014, he abdicated to his son Felipe. Rabbi Ovadia had a profound respect for King Carlos, not only as a powerful world monarch and a world leader, but he respected King Juan Carlos as a chacham, as a sagacious individual, to the point that Rabbi Ovadia felt that upon seeing King Juan Carlos, 2 separate blessings should be made. First, Rabbi Ovadia said, of course, to make the bracha, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, shecholak mikvoidoi lebasar v'dam. This is a blessing that is made on a world leader that has the power of life and death. But furthermore, Rabbi Vadia said, since Juan Carlos is an extremely wise man, we should also make the blessing, Shechalak mechachmasoi lebasar v'dam. And then Rabbi Vadia had the following halachic dilemma. Well, if you're supposed to be making two blessings on King Juan Carlos, Shechalak mikvoidai and Shechalak mechachmasai, should two blessings be made, or should they both be incorporated into one? And amazingly, it's recorded in Rabbi Vadia's Sefer Shiurei Rishon L'Tzion Chelek Aleph. Rabbi Vadia paskin that both blessings should be incorporated in one liturgy, and Rabbi Vadia made the following blessing upon seeing King Juan Carlos: Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, shechalak mikvoidoi umechachmasoi lebasar v'dam. Fine. At this historic meeting, Rabbi Vadia was asked by the king an amazing question. He says, Rabbi, tell me something. Is there a difference between Ashkenazim and Sfardim? So isn't that amazing? No, that's what's on the Goyish king's mind. What's the difference between Ashkenazim and Sfardim? So Rabbi Vadia says there's no difference. Torah achas u'mishpat echad l'kulanu. We only have minor discrepancies in terms of custom, but there are no fundamental differences. By the way, Rabbi Vadia says that when we entered the palace, it was very hot, and my wife, Margalit, she was famished from the travels, she was flush, and the queen, upon seeing how flush my wife was, she got out of her throne, she went up to the window. If you ever went to Spain, in these big palaces, they have tall windows, so you have to take the big stick, and she opened the window. Rabbi Vadia says, the queen of Spain serving my wife was a fulfillment of the prophecy of the Navi Yeshaya, that your queens will serve us. Rabbi Vadia says that was fulfilled when the queen of Spain honored my wife. Then King Juan Carlos says, I express my sincere regret for what our people did to your people 500 years ago during the Spanish Inquisition. And King Juan Carlos says that at the time, many Jews from Spain made their way to Amsterdam, where they were accepted with open arms. And that is where the first Bible was printed, here in Amsterdam. And the king revealed to Rabbi Vadia, I actually have a copy of the first Bible that was printed in Amsterdam, and I read from it daily, and I learn from it daily, and I appreciate the wisdom and the intelligence of the Torah. The king then turns to Rabbi Vadia, and this is recorded in the Hakdama of Rabbi Vadia's Sefer Ma'orei Yisrael. The king turns to Rabbi Vadia, he says, how many Jews live in Israel today? How many Sfardim live in Israel? Because the king was very attached to Sfardim, because Sfardim means Jews of Spain. Rabbi Vadia says, Sfardim is a very generic term. It includes Eidos HaMizrach, Babylonians, Jews from Morocco, from Iran, from Egypt, from Syria, from Yemen. They're all considered Sfardim. Sfardim is a very general term. At this point, King Juan Carlos asked Rabbi Vadia a stunning question, a question any serious student of history should really ask themselves. Ask King Juan Carlos, frekt, as we say in the yeshiva, frekt King Juan Carlos Rabbi Vadia, could you please explain to me why Jews who have no connection at all to Spain, Jews from Yemen, Jews from Morocco, Jews from Iraq, Jews from Iran, Jews from Syria, who not them, not their parents, and none of their ancestors ever stepped foot in Spain, why are they called Spaniards? Why are they called Sfardim? It's a wise man, good question, no? And Rabbi Vadia shared an answer, and I think the principle of this answer should be for us a guiding light in our life. Says Rabbi Vadia, you have to understand, King, our nation is different than all other nations. Other nations, a nationality is usually determined by a common language or a common land. Not so Judaism. We have no common land in common. We have no common language. Ein umasenu uma ella b'Torah. Our nation is only a nation through the Torah. And therefore, the greatest sage of Spanish history is Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimon, the Rambam. He was born on Shabbos, Erev Pesach, in the year 1135. In the year 4895. By the way, it's Hafla V'Fela. We have a tradition. There are 5,845 psukim in the Torah corresponding to world history. Each pasuk corresponds to another year of world history. The 4,895th pasuk in the Chumash, the pasuk corresponding to the year of the birth of the Rambam, is Hayol Moshe Be'er Es HaTorah Hazois Leimar. Be'er Hayol Moshe Be'er Es HaTorah Hazois Leimar. Moses, Moshe, Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimon began to explain the Torah. Says Rabbi Vadia, you know why all these Jews are called Sfardim? Because they've all accepted upon themselves the authority, the halacha of the greatest sage who ever lived in Spain, the Rambam. Anyone who accepts the Rambam as their guiding light is now a Spaniard. And therefore they're called Sfardim. Because the definition of a Jew is which Chachamim are you connected with? Which rabbis are you associated with? Who's your teacher? Who's your mentor? You're not defined by what country you live in. You're not defined by what language you speak. You're defined by which Chachamim do you learn from. Vayitav hadavar beinei hamelech vayaskein. It put a big smile on the face of King Juan Carlos that there's so many Jews all over the world that consider themselves Spaniards because they accept upon themselves the authority of the Rambam. And I would like to use this as a guiding light in what we're going to speak about today. You know, sometimes people tell me, I have a great Dvar Torah to tell you. Really? And they tell me, I said, who said it? I forgot. You know what that's like? That's like, I ate a great meal today. What you ate? I'm not sure. I forgot to swallow it. I just chewed it, but I forgot to eat it. How do you not know who said it? That's like half the Dvar Torah. That's half of it. You don't know which rabbi it was? You don't know where it came from? Half of learning is understanding and recognizing and appreciating the great teacher who dedicated his life to think of the idea, to teach the idea, to give over the idea. The Jewish people have to feel a connection to the Torah and to its teachers. To Torah and to Moshe Rabbeinu. To Torah and to your Rebbe. That's part of the Messiah, that's part of the tradition of the generation. You know, imagine somebody, you look at him, he's so skinny. He looks like he hasn't eaten in years. So what's going on? You don't eat? It looks like you're eating. No, I eat, but I don't swallow the food. So you could learn, but you need to know, just like in the Gemara, you need to know, who said it? Was it Rabbi Akiva? Was it Reb Meir? Was it Reb Tarfon? Was it a Tana? Was it an Amoira? Was it a Rishon? Was it an Achron? Sometimes people say, the Ben Ish Chai, when did he live? Was he friends with the Rambam? Ribono d'Alma Kula. The Ben Ish Chai lived, 100 years ago. The Rambam lived 1,000 years ago. So, even though, of course, like they say in the yeshivas were much more concerned with what Rashi said than what color Rashi's jacket was. In the secular world, in the world of academia, they're more concerned with what Rashi ate for breakfast than what Rashi says. But nevertheless, you need to know a little bit about where Rashi lived. Rashi didn't live in Borough Park. Rashi didn't live in Israel. You have to know Rashi lived in France, when he lived, how he established his family, how he established his lineage, how did he get to France, why did he write Rashi? If you understand why he wrote Rashi, then you'll understand why he makes a comment. There is nothing Rashi ever said unless he was bothered by a question. And if you don't know that principle, then you're missing at least half of what Rashi's saying. You have to know Rashi's operating principle is Va'ani loibasi ela l'pshuto shel mikra. Rashi's operating principle is, I'm here to tell you the simple meaning of the pasuk, which means there are countless other valid and genuine commentaries that could have been said that Rashi rejected because they're not what is called pshuto shel mikra. So I would like to discuss primarily this morning one of my all-time favorite Gedolei Yisrael, somebody who actually made his way to this wonderful city at least 2 times, and that is Maran Reb Chaim Yosef David Azulai, the Chida. The Chida lived from 1724 to 1806. Reb Chaim Yosef David Azulai. And he lived in Yerushalayim. He was a Talmud of Rav Shalom Sharabi, the Rashash, one of the great Mekubalim. He was an associate with another Mekubal named Reb Chaim de la Rosa. Both of them are buried on Rav Shalom Sharabi, he's buried on Har HaZeisim. Reb Chaim de la Rosa is buried on Har HaZeisim. The Chida is not buried on Har HaZeisim. The Chida was originally buried in Livorno, and then he was moved to Har Menuchais. Legend has it that we're familiar, the Chida spent a good percent of his life traveling. He traveled from 1753 to 1758 through 148 cities. And then in 1773 to 1778, he traveled through 156 cities. Why did the Chida travel so much? So primarily, the Chida was a shadar, shlucha d'Rabbanan. He was an agent of the rabbis. He wasn't a secret agent. He was a double Dutch. He was an he was an open agent. Who was he an agent for? The Chachamim of Yerushalayim. He was collecting money for the yeshivas of Eretz Yisrael. He believed very strongly in collecting money for the yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael. And at the time, there was a lot of controversy with the institution of Shadarim. Shadarim were basically Meshulachim who would go throughout Europe and collect money for the yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael. And the reason for the controversy is, very often these Shadarim, when they were sent to Europe to collect money, they very often never made it home. So their wives didn't know what happened to them. Their wives were left as an aguna. So many of them actually gave a divorce document to their wife before they left. They didn't know if they would ever make it back. Very often they would be sent, they would collect large sums of money, and the money would never make it back because they would be captured by pirates, or the money was stolen, or sometimes the Shadarim were not always ethical. So there was a lot of controversy regarding the institution of Shadarim, but the Chida wrote a tshuva in Yosef Oimetz, Siman Yotes, where he defends and upholds the institution of Shadarim, where he says a very beautiful idea. Also, another reason why Shadarim was not appreciated is people said, hey, look, in Amsterdam, we have yeshivas, we have to support our own. In Altona, in Hamburg, in Wandsbek, in many of the cities throughout Europe, they had local institutions. Why are we giving money to yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael? We have local moistos to support. So the Chida penned the following tshuva in the Yosef Oimetz. Writes the Chida, there are 2 mitzvahs that are shakol keneged kol mitzvah Shabbat. There are 2 mitzvahs that are equal to all 613 mitzvahs. Number 1, limadat Torah. Learning Torah is equal to all 613 mitzvahs. Number 2, living in Eretz Yisrael. Living in Eretz Yisrael is equal to all 613 mitzvahs. Ask the Chida, imagine if you could combine learning in Eretz Yisrael and living in Eretz Yisrael. That is the ultimate zechus. And if you can't live there and learn there, at least have a share in it, support the learning of Eretz Yisrael. I always like to apply the following narrative in the Chumash. Did you ever notice, does anybody know, in America there's a sport, it's not a good sport, you don't want your kids following this sport, there's something called wrestling. Wrestling. You know what wrestling is? 2 guys get into a rink, and the objective is to pin the other guy down. Did Avraham Avinu ever wrestle with anybody in the Chumash? No wrestling matches between Avraham Avinu and any angels in the Chumash. Yitzchak Avinu, is he wrestling anyone? No, he's not wrestling him. Yaakov Avinu has a wrestling match. Who's he wrestling with? The archangel of Esav. What does Esav's angel want from Yaakov? He wants to kill Yaakov. He wants blood. He wants to kill Yaakov Avinu. So the Chafetz Chaim asks, why is the angel of Esav only interested in killing Yaakov? Why not Yitzchak? Why did he leave Yitzchak alone? Why did he leave Abraham alone? So the Chafetz Chaim says an incredible idea. The Chafetz Chaim says that Avraham Avinu annoyed the angel of death, but the angel of death could deal with him. Esav's angel could tolerate Avram Avinu. Because Avram Avinu was doing chesed. He was doing acts of kindness. The Yetzer Hara does not like acts of kindness. It annoys him, but he could tolerate it. So he left Avraham alone. Yitzchak Avinu is the midah of Gevura, Tefillah, Avodah. Yitzchak Avinu personified service of God, prayer. The Yetzer Hara doesn't like that, but he could tolerate it. He'll swallow it. And he left Yitzchak alone. But Yaakov Avinu is the embodiment, is the semel, is the paragon of Talmud Torah. The Yetzer Hara hates Talmud Torah. Do you know why? Because Talmud Torah is the antidote to the Yetzer Hara. Talmud Torah is a dagger in the heart of the Yetzer Hara. It's the kryptonite, if you will, of the Yetzer Hara. You cannot have Torah and the Yetzer Hara. Torah destroys the evil inclination. The Gemara says in Kedushin, Barasi Yetzer Hara, Barasi Torah Tavlin. So therefore, Yaakov Avinu and the angel of Esav, the two of them can't exist. The angel of Esav says, it's either me or him, and he's in for blood. So he tries to destroy Yaakov Avinu. That's the Chafetz Chaim. So I would ask, okay, but why is the angel of Esav only after Yaakov Avinu, when Yaakov Avinu is returning back to the land of Israel? I mean, Yaakov Avinu, he's been around for 77 years until now, and the angel of Esav didn't try to destroy Yaakov Avinu. Why is he after him specifically at this juncture? But according to the Chidah, we understand that now Yaakov Avinu is returning to Eretz Yisrael. So now he's going to be combining the two mitzvahs that are equal to all 613 mitzvahs. Learning Torah in the land of Israel, that the Yetzer Hara cannot tolerate, and the Yetzer Hara tried to actually destroy Yaakov Avinu. So the Chidah was a proponent of the system of Shadarim, and the Chidah traveled throughout the length and breadth of Europe, North Africa. He was in Tunisia, he was in Italy, he was in Amsterdam 2 times, both in his trip in 1753 and in 1773. And he has very interesting comments about the city of Amsterdam. The Chidah was actually offered to become the chief rabbi of Amsterdam, which he politely declined. But the Chidah also refers to the Pri Chadash, who was also offered to be the chief rabbi of Amsterdam. And the Pri Chadash says, here's the deal. I know what kind of arrangement you want to make. You want me to take a small salary, and you're going to say you're going to give me big gifts. I don't want your gifts. Because if I accept your gifts, that means you're buying me. And then I'm going to be limited in what I could tell you. So here's the deal. You're going to give me a big salary and no gifts. So the board had to think about it. And if when I went to the Spanish-Portuguese synagogue and I saw the boardroom, I was just imagining the deliberations that went on between the board and the Pri Chadash. And they came back, they said, we accept your offer. I think something like 1,000 ducats. Big, what? Yeah, a nice offer. Ultimately, the Pri Chadash turned them down. So why do you turn them down? He said, because I'm going to be very limited in what I'm able to tell you. You want me to officiate, you want me to be at your weddings, at your funerals, but you don't really want me to tell you how to live your lives. Not for me. And the Chidah records in his Magel Tov, fortunate is a Pri Chadash in this world and in the world to come, that he did not succumb to the illusory honor of such a position. That's what the Chidah writes about the Pri Chadash. The Chidah says when he was in Amsterdam, he met Rav Shaul of Amsterdam, the son of Rabbi Aryeh Leib of Amsterdam. And he says he was nene from the divine presence of Rav Shaul of Amsterdam. And the Chidah actually talks about spending Purim together with Rav Shaul of Amsterdam. And the Chidah describes that they brought in to Rav Shaul of Amsterdam a model of the palace of Achashverosh and the courtyard of Achashverosh and all the guards and all the chotzer, and it was entirely made out of candy. And this was a gift given to Rav Shaul of Amsterdam by the community. And the Chidah describes that on a Saturday night here in Amsterdam, after a long Shabbos. Well, Shabbos is over like on Tuesday in Amsterdam, right? On a long Matzai Shabbos, he writes how the wealthy in the community, they were out the whole night, marrying and frolicking, and the Chida was very displeased with that type of behavior. Why? Because they were acting as if this is their city, and forgetting about the fact that we're in the Galus. And the Chida comments, no matter how comfortable we are, no matter how much peace and tranquility and acceptance we have, we always have to recognize we're not at home. These are some interesting observations that the Chida has. One of my favorite all-time Sfarim that the Chida wrote is the Shem HaGedolim. Now you have to understand what the Shem HaGedolim is. Shem HaGedolim is a compilation of all the Chachamim that ever lived from the beginning of time until the time of the Chida, written in alphabetical order, and then a list of all the Sfarim that were ever written from the beginning of time until the time of the Chida. This is a work of bibliographic genius. Can you imagine? Listing in alphabetical order every single sefer ever written, every single rabbi who ever lived. So you could imagine, the Chida was probably sitting in a big library, and he just sat there, going from Aleph to Beis to Gimel to Daled, jotting down. Did you know that the Chida wrote this entire work from memory? He had not only no computer, he had no books in front of him. When the Chida arrived in Italy, he was in quarantine. Like, when somebody has COVID, they put them in quarantine. So somebody would come from a different country. He was in something called lazaretto. Lazaretto is quarantine. He was on a boat with no books for 40 days. So the Chida, having nothing better to do, wrote the Shem HaGedolim from memory. Now, the Chida, in his bibliographic proficiency, modern academics say that nobody even rivals the Chida in bibliography until Moritz Steinschneider, who is like the father of modern day bibliography. He is the only one who's been able to even remotely be comparable to the Chida, and the Chida did this from memory. That's what type of mind he had. Now, if you look at the book, Shem HaGedolim, you sort of wonder, what's the purpose of this book? Well, the Chida was not an academic. The Chida was not a scientist. What's the value of having the names of all the rabbis who ever lived and the names of all the Sfarim who ever lived? So I want to share with you two important ideas. The Chida was not the first one to do this. The author of Sifsei Chachamim, you know the Sefer Sifsei Chachamim? Sifsei Chachamim is a commentary on Rashi. We call it a super commentary, a commentary on a commentary. The author of Sifsei Chachamim, who tells us what Rashi was bothered by, the author of Sifsei Chachamim wrote a Sefer also before the Chida, listing all the rabbis who lived, all the Sfarim that were ever written. And the Chassam Sofer is troubled. What's the value of such a work? Why did he write such a work? And the Chassam Sofer says the following principle. It says in Parshas V'aschanan, V'shamata Yisrael V'shamarta la'asais. Literally, listen Israel, and observe and keep. Says the Chassam Sofer, a great principle. V'shamata Yisrael. When you hear the word Yisrael, V'shamarta la'asais, it will engender within you the desire to observe the Torah. The principle is as follows. We think that the words we say don't necessarily influence us. So we'll talk about who's the Prime Minister of Holland?
Rutte, for the moment. Mark Rutte.
We talk about, we throw out names of world leaders and governors and mayors, and we think the words we say don't have an influence on us. Or we could talk about tzaddikim, and we think, well, actually, maybe only when I learn Torah, that influences me positively. And the Chassam Sofer introduces a concept, merely by saying the names of rabbis, the naming of the rabbi, saying the name of the rabbi, saying the name of the sefer, influences a person for the good. Vishamata Yisrael, when you hear holiness, holy words, holy svarim, holy rabbis, it influences you for the good. When you talk about nonsense, it influences you for the bad. The value of merely knowing the names of rabbis and the names of the books, that also influences a person l'taiv. But there's another important reason as well. You know, another one of my favorite Gedolim was the Malbim. The Malbim, Rav Meir Leibish ben Yechiel Michal. Also one of the most important works ever written on the Chumash. Actually, the Malbim had a very, very difficult rabbinic career. He was chased and harried out of many, many different kehilos. The progressives and the reform movement gave the Malbim a very, very hard time. But the Malbim was one of the most important commentaries ever written on Chumash. Many people learn many mefarshim on Chumash, but they don't use the Malbim. The Malbim is from the most important. The Briskers say there are three achronim who have the power of a Rishain. Of course, they say Reb Chaim Brisker, and the other is the Vilna Gaon, and the third is the Malbim. The Malbim, his unique quality is that while other commentaries understand, there's something called Shemois HaNerdafim. Shemois HaNerdafim are synonyms. There's a big question in Jewish grammar. Are there synonyms or not? Chazak ve'emas. Does it mean the same thing? Al tira v'al techas. There are many words that seem to have haid v'hadar. And the Malbim's opinion is there are no synonyms in Lashon HaKodesh. Each word in Lashon HaKodesh carries a very specific nuance of difference. That's one of the great principles of the Malbim. Another important principle of the Malbim, and this is the Chafetz Chaim writes about, that the Chafetz Chaim says we no longer are able to understand the methodology of how the Gemara makes drashos. The Gemara makes kal v'choimers, gzeira shavas, all kinds of drashos. Klal pradu klal, yud gimel midah shatar nedrashos behem. The Chafetz Chaim says we don't fully understand how the Amorah made drashas. You need to be a great Gaon like the Malbim to understand the drashas of Chazal. The Malbim established 613 rules of Hebrew grammar. That anytime any of these rules are violated, it's a trigger to Chazal to make a drasha. And the Rambam in the beginning of Sefer Vayikra gives us 613 rules of Jewish grammar. So if you master these rules and you read a pasuk, you'll be alerted every time there's a change in how words should be written or phrases should be formulated, and you'll understand why Chazal made the drashas that they do. Anyway, the Malbim did not have respite in his rabbinic career, primarily because he fought vehemently against the reform movement, who did not believe in the divinity of the oral law. And he went from one post to another, from one rabbanus to another. And in the 1860s, the Malbim did not have a rabbanus. He sat and he learned in a city called Linschitz, where he wrote many of his svarim. The Rav in the city of Linschitz was my grandfather's grandfather. Okay, we're going back to the 1860s. My grandfather passed away recently at 106 years old. So his grandfather, someone who I knew, his grandfather, he was best friends with the Malbim. The Malbim sat in his Beis Medrash and he wrote the Malbim. So sometimes, probably at the time, the Malbim was not pleased he did not have official capacity. But if not for that, Kallah Yisrael would not have had the Malbim. Why am I bringing this up? My grandfather was so attached to the Malbim because my grandfather grew up as a Yasaim. His father passed away when my grandfather was very young. My grandfather has no memories of his father other than that at the Levaya they covered the body and his father's toe was sticking out. He remembers seeing that as a young boy. My grandfather, he knew his grandfather was very close to the Malbim. The Malbim was like his adopted uncle. He did not go an hour of his life without talking about the Malbim. He dedicated his life to studying the Malbim. In fact, my grandfather's initials are Malbim. Mordechai Leib ben Yosef Menachem. So he felt very close to the Malbim. He always spoke about the Malbim. In fact, I have somewhat of a unusual, spooky story that on one of my trips, we were in the Ukraine, and it was the last day of the trip, and I miscalculated the scheduling of the trip, because the last night of the trip was going to be a special birthday for me. I'm not going to tell you my age, I'm not going to tell you what birthday it was, but it wasn't a day that if I would have scheduled it, I would have wanted to be in some forsaken place in the Ukraine. I mean, the Ukraine is a crazy place. You read in the comic books about these drunken ogres walking around and stumbling. That's what it's like. You go to the Ukraine. They're just like shikorim walking around. They're wild dogs roaming the streets. It's a crazy place. And here I am. I'm on this special day, and I miscalculated the trip. I would have pushed everything up a day earlier. And it's 11 p.m. at night. We're going to get into the hotel like 1 a.m. and we're going to fly out in the morning. And I'm thinking, what in the world am I doing here on this special occasion? And our trip organizer at the time, he gets a phone call, and he turns to me. He says, Rabbi Glatstein, you want to go to one more kever? I said, I'm always game for a kever. I'm always, I said, which kever? Over here in the Ukraine? We're in Kiev. There weren't Jews here really. In terms of back in the day, it wasn't a Jewish area. And he said, no, they just found a kever. I said, whose kever did they just find? He says, the Malbim. I said, the Malbim? The Malbim didn't have a kever. My grandfather told me when the Malbim died, they did not put up a monument because the Reform said, we will desecrate his body. So they made no monument for the Malbim. In fact, at the end of the Malbim's life, he finally had respite in one rabbinic post. And then he decided he's going to move. They asked him, why are you going to move? He says, because I had a dream, and in my dream, I was told that it's time for me to pass away, but only after I go to a city that begins with a K. And he received an invitation to become a Rav in Krenychug. So the Malbim was traveling to Krenychug to be able to fulfill this dream that he had. And sure enough, he never made it there. He passed away in the city of Kiev. And people were very disheartened and demoralized that one of the Gedolei Hador passed away in a Gentile city. There are no Jews there. And he was literally buried in the middle of nowhere, not in a Jewish cemetery. And Rabbi Yisrael Salanter came to the Levaya, and he had to dispel like the elephant in the room. Why did this happen to the Malbim? And Rabbi Yisrael Salanter said, look, we don't know the secrets of God, but we know that Moshe Rabbeinu was buried in a very almost inappropriate place. Moshe Rabbeinu was buried Mol Beis Pa'ar, opposite the sin where Jews defiled themselves by uncovering themselves in a very inappropriate way. And Moshe Rabbeinu was buried there so that at the time of resurrection, he'll be able to protect and save all the Jews who sinned. It must be the Malbim needs to be here to be able... We don't know why. God has some kind of calculation why the Malbim needs to be buried here. And on that fateful night, I found out why the Malbim was buried there. Because many years later, the location of the burial site of the Malbim became the biggest Jewish cemetery in the history of the world and the biggest cemetery in the history of the world. The Malbim is buried in Babi Yar, right in Babi Yar, where hundreds of thousands of Jews are buried right there. So perhaps the Malbim needed to be there somehow to protect all of these Yidden. So that's an interesting thing that came up during some of our travels. I have another interesting story. In the summer of 2021, we also went to the Ukraine, and this was right after COVID. And many people didn't want to travel then. People were scared to travel right after COVID. So we had to come up with like a gimmick, how to get people to go to the Ukraine. So we said we're going to go to the kever of Rabbi Shaila of Karastir. This has become like a hot spot. Everybody wants to go to the kever of Rabbi Shaila of Karastir. But I had a different reason why I wanted to go to the Ukraine. In the Ukraine, one of the important cities was the city of Lvov, Lemberg. Lemberg. You know the city of Lemberg? Lemberg was the center of great printing. You open up many Sfarim, you open up to the title page, it says published in Lemberg. And I wanted to go there because there are many great Gedolim who are buried there. The Taz, the great commentary on Orach Chaim and Yardea. The Sma, the author of the Drisha and the Prisha. The Yeshuas Yaakov, Rabbi Yaakov Orenstein. The Shoyal Umeshiv. You know who else is buried there? The rabbi of this city. Chacham Tzvi. Chacham Tzvi is buried there. So I go there. Not yet. It's the last day of our trip. We went to Rabbi Shaila of Karastir. We went to the Kvar Mavo, the Hasidic Rebbes that everybody wanted to go to. And that's how I got them to go on the trip in the first place. And of course, we're running out of time. And I said, what do you mean running out of time? I came here to see the Taz and the Sma and the Yeshuas Yag and Shalom Eshev. Okay, we're going to try to squeeze it in on the way to the airport. And people didn't want to wait around with me, so they went a little bit early. The traffic in Lemberg was terrible. That's why things got delayed so much. And I'm in the last taxi, and we tell the driver, before we get to the airport, we got to go to these Kvarim. He said, I know what you're talking about. There are no cemeteries in Lemberg. Which rabbis are buried here? Rabbis buried in Lemberg? Nobody knew what we were talking about. We're going, the traffic is terrible. It's like an hour and change in front and before the flight. And the driver says, look, either you go to the cemetery that doesn't exist, or you go onto your plane, but you're not going to see both. And I don't even know what cemetery you're talking about. We said, I don't know, maybe it's not a cemetery, maybe it's just a monument, something about a hospital. He says, oh, the monument by the hospital? All of a sudden, and the whole time everybody is getting very nervous. And everyone's like, we can't go, we're going to miss the flight, and I'm silently praying, Rebbeinu Shalom, I didn't want to come to the Ukraine, I only came here to see the Taz and the Sma, please make this happen. And all of a sudden, when the driver heard hospital, he makes a 90-degree turn. All of a sudden, the traffic clears. He takes us behind the hospital, where they're like air conditioning generators, and right there is a monument for a cemetery that used to be there. Okay? It says the Taz is buried there. The Sma is buried there. The Chacham Tzvi, the Yeshuas Yaakov, the Shalom Eshev. By the way, I want to tell you, the Sma had a very righteous wife. Eshes Hasma. She was so righteous, and she was very learned as well. She was so learned, she's quoted by the Sma's children in the introduction to the Sma regarding the proper time of lighting candles the night of Yom Tov. She was a very righteous woman and a very learned woman. And she wanted to fast and be betainis and to do tshuva, but she didn't do so long as her husband was alive, because she needed to tend to her husband. When the Sma passed away, the wife of the Sma did something unheard of. She immigrated from the Ukraine and she moved to the land of Israel. We're talking about the 17th century. And she moved to Yerushalayim on her own. And then she was able to observe all of her righteous practices. And she opened up institutions of Gemilas Chasadim. And she was considered so righteous that when the wife of the Sma passed away, they gave her one of the most honorable burial spots in the entire world. I was zoicha to be there. She's buried next to Zechariah Hanavi at the foot of Har HaZeisim, the wife of the Sma, Eishes HaSma. But why am I telling you this? There was another individual buried there. And I'm looking at the name, and the name was Rav Mordechai Zev Segal Antinga. And I'm embarrassed to say, I didn't know who that was. I knew who the Taz was, I knew who the Sma was, I knew who the Yeshuas Yaakov was, the Shalom Eshev, the Chacham Tzvi. I never heard of Rav Mordechai Zev Antinga. Fine. I figured he must be a big rabbi. I took a picture, I took a video. That Friday, I come home, I'm giving a shiur on Friday. I need some good material for a shiur. I found a kasha, a beautiful kasha. The kasha was the kasha of the Magen Gibarim. Magen Gibarim is someone the Mishnah Berurah quotes on every page. I think also the author of the Maimon Mordechai. And the Magen Gibarim asked the following question. This was in the 3 weeks. And we like to go on the trips during the 3 weeks because this way people have no excuse why they can't come. They can't take a haircut then. They're not doing that much laundry, and they can't go to weddings, so you have no excuse. You got to come on our trip, right? So, we know that one of the reasons the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed was because Shaloi berchu b'Torah tchila. They didn't make Birchas HaTorah. And the Gemara indicts the Jewish people that they did not make Birchas HaTorah. So the Magen Gibarim asks the following very interesting question. What's the halacha if you don't make Birchas HaTorah in the morning, but you say Ahava Rabbah? Are you Yotzei B'diavad? So the Gemara says that you could be Yotzei Birchas HaTorah by saying Ahava Rabbah. So ask the Magen Gibarim, so big deal they didn't say Birchas HaTorah. But they said Birchas Kriya Shema, they said Ahava Rabbah. So they fulfill their obligation that way. What's the big indictment that they didn't make Birchas HaTorah, but they said Ahava Rabbah. So I gave the shiur because, what this question teaches us is that there must be something about Birchas HaTorah proper that's not in Ahava Rabbah. And indeed, in Birchas HaTorah proper, we have the emphasis on davening for our children. V'niya anachnu v'tze'etzo'enu kulanu yoidei shemecha. So apparently, it's not enough just to ask Hashem for Torah, but it's important to daven for the spiritual welfare of our children. The Mishnah Berurah says, people think, I daven for my children every Rosh Hashanah, every Erev Rosh Chodesh Sivan. Mishnah Berurah says a father and mother, it should always be fluent in their mouths, prayers for their children. By the way, there are many, many junctures and intervals in the davening where a person should have in mind the spiritual welfare of their children. Mishnah Berurah says, when you say Birchas HaTorah, when you say in Kriya Shema, the Ramchal says, V'shinantam levanecha, you should have it in mind. When you say Atachoinen, when you say Hashivenu, when you say in Moedim, L'dar Vadar Noidelacha. There are many, many junctures. So I'm thinking to myself, the Magen Gibarim, very interesting. Who wrote the Magen Gibarim? Say, hey, actually, isn't it interesting? I've never given a shiur specifically on a Magen Gibarim before. So I opened up the Shem HaGedolim, and the Magen Gibarim, sure enough, is written by Reb Mordechai Zev Atinga, the kever I was just at. So here it was, shortly before, I never heard of this person. And right after, all of a sudden, his Torah was open to me. The Malbim once wrote, for one of the editions of the Shem HaGedolim, the Malbim wrote a Hakdama to the Shem HaGedolim. And the Malbim says, let me explain to you why this is such an important work. Imagine a person was traveling in a desert and was hungry, was famished, was undernourished, and they encounter a very big orchard with trees and a stream and luscious fruit. And obviously there was a great benefactor who planted this orchard and built the orchard and set it up for your enjoyment. After resting there and after eating there and after enjoying there, what are you going to ask? The first question you're going to ask is, who built this orchard? Why did they make the orchard? What was their intention? What was their kavanah? Why did they make this? And if you're told, I don't know, we don't know who he is, we don't know anything about him, it would be disappointing. Says the Malbim, after you learn a sefer, the first question you want to know is, who wrote this sefer? Why did they write this sefer? What was their intention? What were the times they lived in? That should be the first question you ask. So that's what the Chidah did for us. The Chidah provided us the answers to this important question. So, as we began, the definition of a Jew is not as much what country you live in, what language you speak. More importantly, who are your teachers? Who are your chachamim? Do you know about them? Are you connected with them? Do you feel a connection with them? And that's an important lesson to take learning to the next level. You see, friends, it's not enough just to learn. Many people learn, You need the learning to be coursing through your veins. You need the learning to become part of you. And the more you appreciate the Chachamim, the ones that wrote the Svarim that we learned from many hundreds of years ago, and more importantly, the more you appreciate the Rabbanan that you learned from today, the more meaningful the Torah will be for you. So I wish all of you tremendous bracha v'hatzlacha. It was really a great honor and thrill to join you for a few days. And Be'ezus Hashem, I look forward to spending more time with you in the future. Bracha v'hatzlacha.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.